This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
And welcome to the program. I'm Roby Brock. As always, we're glad to have you with us. A lot happening in Washington, D.C. as we stay focused on what's been hitting here at home, the government shutdown. Late Friday, President Donald Trump gave up his demand for $5.7 billion in border wall funding for a 3-week reopening of the federal government as he, Democrats, and Republicans in Congress cut a deal. It's the same deal that was on the table before Christmas. I caught up with the 2nd District Congressman French Hill, Republican from Little Rock, before the deal was announced to find out his thoughts on why this impasse seems so hard to overcome. There was a compromise in place before Christmas as well that Senator McConnell, the leader in the Senate, let some bills go through. There was a unanimous consent vote in the Senate. Then that got altered apparently between the Senate and the House as Speaker Paul Ryan at the time brought up a different set of bills there. It seems that some of this does center around the president's negotiations and the fact that he seemed to have undone the deal that was there before Christmas. You've been in business before. You've negotiated with people before that tell you one thing, change their mind and do something else. It's pretty difficult to negotiate with people like that. How do you negotiate with somebody in good faith?
Well, I do think there needs to be good faith on both sides. We need Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump both negotiating in good faith. They both have to trust in a process that leads to an outcome. I think members in both the House and Senate desperately want their leaders to come together and reason together and come up with an appropriate middle ground, and that's what I think Leader McConnell is working on this week. He's going to bring a measure to the floor that's open to amendment and see if he can get engagement from Democrats in the Senate to move this process forward. Also over here in the House, Steny Hoyer, the number 2 person in the Democratic Conference, disagrees with Nancy Pelosi on border fencing. Chairman Thompson disagrees with Nancy Pelosi on border fencing. Colin Peterson, who chairs the Agriculture Committee, disagrees with her position on border fencing. So the Democratic Conference here also is going through some soul searching on what they should recommend to their leadership that they do in working this out with President Trump.
A last question for you. Obviously, border wall funding, border security funding, I think some people get these two confused. They're not necessarily, they can go hand in hand, they can also be separate things. Right here, you visited the border a lot in your time in Congress, I think 4 times. Where do we need a wall right now? Where do you think there is a deficiency for a wall if this is such a priority that seems to have closed the federal government down?
Right. Well, some of the money that's in the Homeland Appropriations process goes to rebuild and replace sections of the fencing that we've had. Some of the fencing, some of the earliest fencing is in the San Diego corridor. It was initially put in place back in the early 1990s. It's in need of repair and modernization. So fencing is very important near the ports of entry, and fencing is also important in areas where the terrain offers an easy access into the United States. When you meet with Border Patrol and local sheriffs, what you learn about the fencing is it helps them shape the environment of their enforcement effort. It allows you to make better use of your manpower because you can target the manpower at those ports of entry and at the edges of where that fencing runs, whether you're in a small town like Del Rio, Texas, or in a big city like El Paso or San Diego.
Does a new wall need to be built somewhere? I mean, is there a place where a new wall needs to exist, where there needs to be some construction from the ground up?
Oh, I think there are places. There's the Homeland Security Department's recommended about 200 miles of additional fencing. And when we say fencing, it's a double fence with a parallel road system, with lighting, with infrared technology for recognition at night vision, and all the bells and whistles technologically with it. And those would be probably in South Texas, where there's very limited fencing in certain of the municipal areas and certain open areas in South Texas. People are not proposing, obviously, this kind of technology in the Big Bend, rugged canyon country of Big Bend.
That interview was conducted on Wednesday of this past week, the day before two measures were tried in the U.S. Senate, both of which failed. Again, late Friday, a 3-week deal was brokered to reopen the government while a window would exist for a border security debate. On Friday, right before the deal was announced, I sat down with Michael John Gray, chairman of the Democratic Party of Arkansas, for his take on why Washington, D.C. is broken. What changed between December and now? I mean, you're saying it's gamesmanship. Is that all it is?
It's politics.
What else happened?
It's absolute politics. It's the president has found a wedge issue. Look, border security has been a question for as long as we've existed, and it has not been strictly a Republican issue. We've had Democratic presidents said we needed to address border security. We've seen clips come out during this shutdown where there were Democratic leaders that said build a wall. It has just become, they're playing to a wedge issue. The president is using border security, but what he's really saying is, I'm playing to your fears and racism and uneducated assumptions about what's really going on down there. And I know this is a wedge issue that works in the 5-minute conversation at every coffee shop in America, and I'm going to do it. And I'm going to take the human face off of it and make it is what it is. We saw it during campaign season, especially here in Little Rock in the 2nd District, where we saw mailers that were MS-13 and things like that. It's not a true question about border security. It's more playing to the base and the fears and using a wedge issue, and that's campaign stuff. It's not governing stuff.
What's the conversation in the coffee shops in Augusta, Arkansas, where you're at? What's the average Arkansan in rural Arkansas saying about all
So
this?
the average Arkansan in rural Arkansas is saying build a wall. We shouldn't, but if you can get them past that original statement, and you can get to here's the real problem, guys. If you want to build a wall, build a wall. But do you want it going through your farm? Do you want the government taking your land and saying we're building? Well, I'm not sure about that. Then it gets to, do you realize it takes, if people wanted to get here legally from Mexico, it can take upwards of 7 years? No, I didn't realize that. Do you realize that in some of these areas, people are worried about getting shot when they walk out of their house, that there are conditions where there are no opportunities to feed their family? Now, if you were sitting there with your child on your hip, would you care if it was legal or illegal to cross that border if you could go provide a better life for your kids? Well, no, I wouldn't. So I think the problem is we're seeing campaign tactics when we should be governing instead of really educating the public on what's going on. So I've said this, and I've made people in my party a little uneasy by saying it, but look, let's quit fighting. If there are places we need to build a wall, build a wall.
You're for it.
Let's be honest about how effective a wall can be. Mm-hmm. But what I'm for, frankly, is build a wall where you need a wall. Put some doors in it. Spend some money down there to staff the problem. It shouldn't take 7 years, or you shouldn't have to have a doctorate to be able to get to America if you want to come work and provide a better life for your family. So go staff it so where someone can get here easier, legally, if they want to. And oh, by the way, go put a strict penalty on employers that are employing undocumented workers. Because if they are benefiting from this problem, but those are campaign donors, those are influencers. And so the first party, the first elected representative that would come and say, maybe there are places where we need to build a wall, but we've got to put some doors in it, we've got to get a clear path to citizenship and fix this thing, and we're going to penalize bad actors. That's what we need out of Washington. Yep. We need solutions, no more of this blaming it on the other.
That's Michael John Gray, chairman of the Democratic Party of Arkansas, and before him, Congressman French Hill, Republican from the 2nd District. A quick break, and we are back to talk about transformation and transportation at the state level. Representative Andy Davis is in studio when we return.